I lay on planks with my cheek to cold pitch and listened as the Havmand moved along our starboard side. It did not splash. It breathed, slow as a man sleeping, and the breath made ice needles rattle in the scuppers. Above me, the mainsail flogged once, then went limp as if the wind had been cut. In the half-light, a wet handprint climbed the bulwark. Men have asked me, in warm rooms far from the floes, to set down what befell us. If you judge my telling of use, give this record your liking, subscribe, and leave your remark beneath. It began 3 weeks earlier. On June 18th, 1896, we cleared Tromsø in the two-masted schooner Annette, bound for the northern sealing grounds between Bjørnøya and the South Cape of Spitsbergen. Captain Jørgensen carried a brass sextant in a worn mahogany case and a chronometer he trusted as he trusted his own eyes. I served as second mate, kept the deck log, and took the middle watch. We were 10 souls all told, and in that first week the sea was kind, a long swell from the west and daylight that never wholly died. Halvorsen the boatswain mended gear with hands like rope, and when he spoke, it was in short pushes of breath. Dr. Lind, shipped from Christiania, had books in oilcloth and little glass jars for specimens. Petter the cook kept a small tin of shag tobacco in his apron, and after the dog watch he would share it out, pinching it with 2 fingers as if it were gold. We smoked at the lee rail and talked of homes that lay under proper darkness. Halvorsen spoke of a son who had learned to walk while he was away. Linde spoke of his mother, and the narrow street where she sold fish I spoke least, because I had no wife, and my father had died at sea. The talk warmed us more than the pipe. We had no superstitious men aboard, not at the outset. When Petter told a tale he had heard from a Finn of a Havmand that lured boats on the Murman coast, Jørgensen only spat over the side and said, "Keep your eyes for ice, not for wives under the water." We laughed, and the laugh sounded honest in that clean air. On the night of June 26th, with Hopen Island to the east by our dead reckoning and a broad belt of young ice ahead, I heard the first wrong sound. It came up through the planking as I stood by the binnacle. 3 knocks, evenly spaced, like a man rapping at a door. I looked over the side, expecting a loose spar to be striking the hull, but there was only dark water and small pans of ice turning in the wake. A seal surfaced astern and vanished at once, as if it had felt a hand. At daybreak, we hove to and lowered the jolly boat for a lead line cast, for Jørgensen wished to sound a shoal marked doubtful on his chart. The water was 50 fathoms, and the tallow at the hollow of the lead brought up a smear of black sand with tiny shell fragments. Linde bent over it with his lens, pleased as a child. Yet as we pulled back, Halvorsen pointed at the skin of the sea. A line of bubbles ran alongside us, not from our oars, but from below, straight as if drawn with a rule. It kept pace for the length of a prayer, then stopped. The sea went flat about it, as if the swell had been pressed down. Jørgensen said it was a current and ordered the boat hoisted. He kept his tone even, but he looked twice at the water before he climbed the ladder. That evening, the knocks came again. Not 3, but 5. And Petter, crossing himself without knowing, muttered that the ship was being counted. By the 1st of July, we were north of Bjørnøya and met the edge of the pack, white as old bone. The air held a sharpness that cut the lips, though the sun rode high. It was the sort of cold that seemed local, as if we sailed from one climate into another without warning. The men blamed a drift of ice, and perhaps that was all, but I remembered the sudden slackening of the wind when the handprint climbed the bulwark, and I watched the pennant at the masthead more than the horizon. We worked the ship under shortened canvas, yards creaking, every man in oilskins though the sky was clear. Linda wanted specimens from the ice and begged Jurgensen for an hour. We warped alongside a floe and went over with ice poles and a small net. While I held the line, I heard my own name spoken, low and near my ear, as plain as if Halvorsen stood behind me. I turned, and there was only Petter, his mouth closed, his eyes fixed on the white. The same voice spoke again, not my name now, but a soft whistle, the very call Halvorsen used to summon a hand to the foredeck. Halvorsen stiffened. "Who did that?" he asked. No one answered, and the only sound was the thin hiss of brash ice. When we came aboard, the ship's dog, a brindled mongrel called Kvast, refused the ladder and had to be hauled like a sack. He hid under the galley bench and would not eat. Animals did not fear ice. They feared what moved under it. On July 3rd, the fog came, a low woolly mass that deadened distance and made the sea ring like a bell. The world shrank to the length of our own wake. We ran under jib and forestaysail, the lead going often, on the lookout perched with ice glasses, though there was little to see. In such fog, a man listened for danger more than he looked. From somewhere ahead came a song, not full-voiced, but a broken tune carried on the wet air. It rose and fell with the same 3 notes, like a hymn remembered poorly. Linda said at once that it was Walrus bellowing. Halvorsen shook his head. Walrus did not keep time. The tune shifted, and for a moment it took the cadence of Petter's humming at the galley stove. Petter set down his knife and stared at the fog. Then something struck the Anetta from below, not a glancing brush of ice, but a single upward blow. The whole hull rang. My teeth clicked the compass card in the binnacle, spun half a turn, and settled wrong. In the cabin below, the trusted chronometer stopped at 8 minutes past 10, though no hand had touched it. We furled canvas and lay to. The ship drifted, timbers creaking, and the song moved with us, always at the same remove. When the fog thinned at last, there was a floe close alongside that had not been there. Upon it lay our spare harpoon line, the one kept coiled in the forelocker, neatly arranged as if by a careful hand. The locker stood open, and its hasp was bent outward, not torn away as by brute force, but worked. Jurgensen ordered the line taken back, and no man spoke while we hauled it aboard. The chronometer was wound and started again, yet Jurgensen did not trust it after that, and took sights twice each day, muttering numbers as if they were prayers. The compass still showed a small error, not enough to wreck a ship, but enough to make a man doubt his own hands. We blamed the blow on a growler hidden under fog, though no ice had scraped our sides. 2 days later, we met a field of floes so close packed that we made fast to one and waited for a lead. The air fell dead. Even the constant cry of kittiwakes ceased, and the silence pressed upon the ears until a man heard his own blood. Kvast crawled onto the ice and stood with his tail low, nose working. Linda took the net and went looking for algae. I followed with an ice pole. At the far edge, where the floe had been ground and ridged, I saw grooves in the snow, as if a heavy body had been dragged. They ran to a melt hole as round as a barrel top. Beside the hole were marks that might have been fingers, too long for a man. set in a spread that suggested a hand, but not one that had learned to bear weight on land. The snow at their ends was stained with brown, and when I knelt, a sour musk rose from it, like old fish left in a cask. "Seal," Linda said, though he did not touch the marks. He held his jar close, and his eyes kept lifting to the hole. I saw then that Petter's small tin of tobacco was gone from his pocket, though he had not been near the forelocker. That evening, when we searched, we found the tin on the afterdeck, dented as if bitten, its lid neatly prized back. The tobacco within was wet, and it stank of the same musk. On July 9th, with the pack loosening and open leads to the north, we made sail again. The wind came in short gusts, and the sea between floes was dark and thick, as if filled with ink. Toward midnight, I had the watch. The sun lay behind a bank, and the light had the colour of tin. Halvorsen stood with me, his harpoon gun across his knees, more for comfort than for use. There were no birds. I marked that in the log because it was strange to have so much sea and no life above it. Then, from the water off the port bow, came the same 3 notes we had heard in fog, but quieter, as if sunk into a pillow. The sound moved toward us. The wind died in the space of a breath, and the air at my face turned colder, like opening a cellar door. A head broke the surface among the floes. At first I took it for a seal, but it held steady without bobbing. It was dark, with a sheen like wet kelp, and 2 pale eyes sat too far forward. Something like hair clung to it in ropes. It turned, and the eyes fixed on our deck, on us, as if it chose. I smelled the musk before it came nearer. Halvorsen raised the gun. Jørgensen, who had come up without my hearing him, pushed the barrel down. "No shot in ice," he said, and his voice shook with anger at himself. The head sank without a splash. For a moment I believed it had gone. Then the hull grated, not on ice, but on something that drew along it. A long scrape ran from fore to aft, and the deck planks trembled. When we hauled in the log line at dawn, the hemp was scored and slimed, and on the brass spinner were thin scratches that crossed in a pattern like a raked hand. Linda wrapped the spinner in cloth as if it were holy, and Petter refused to touch it. After that watch, the Anetta felt smaller. Jørgensen doubled the lookout, and Halvorsen kept the harpoon gun close enough to touch in sleep. Linda spoke of lowering a lantern in a bucket, but no man would crew the boat. Kvast stayed under the stove. On July 12th, we found the forenet ruined. The lashings had been unknotted with patience, and the mesh pulled apart in clean rents, as if by fingers that understood cordage. The air carried sour musk, and the birds had gone. In the evening, calm the 3 notes returned, faint at first, then so near that they vibrated in my teeth. They came from under the keel. Near midnight, the tiller went hard. Halvorsen and I leaned our weight upon it, and it did not answer. The ship slowed as though held. We heard breathing along the planks, slow as a man sleeping. I lay down and pressed my cheek to the cold pitch to convince myself. Needle ice rattled in the scuppers, though the air was above freezing, and the wind failed as if cut. In the half-light, a wet handprint climbed the bulwark, fingers longer than any man's, and something scraped below it, attesting the wood. Jørgensen ordered the mizzen sheet cut away and the yards braced to what little air remained. Petter flung galley slops over the side, praying aloud. Halvorsen fired once into the black. The report rolled in the fog and returned, and for a heartbeat the sea held its breath. Then the hull shuddered as if released. We gathered way, and the handprint slid down and vanished. We turned south on the 13th, taking no seals. Jurgensen kept the helm himself, eyes raw for want of sleep. Linda locked the scored log spinner and Petter's dented tobacco tin in his chest. Once we thought we saw a dark head among the pans astern, but it sank when we looked full upon it. The song followed us for a day, then ceased, and the silence that replaced it was worse. We made Tromsø on 22nd July. The harbour master asked if we had struck a dead whale, for the musk clung to our lines. Jurgensen spoke only of fog, pack ice, and an unlucky blow from a hidden growler, and in his report he wrote that a bear had worried the net. The clerk accepted it because it fitted his book. My log held winds, bearings, and soundings, and the night the chronometer stopped, I wrote only ice, though I had watched the compass card spin and settle wrong. What proof did we possess, save scratches on brass and an opened hasp? Years later in Bergen, I met Halvorsen in a fish warehouse. He had lost 2 fingers to a winch and said it was nothing. When I asked after the song, he would not face the open water. It counted us, he said, and spat. Once, on the Tromsø quay in summer, I heard 3 knocks from a piling's shadow, and the smell of kelp rose where no tide reached. In my own house, whenever a kettle sang those same 3 notes, my scalp tightened. On winter nights, I woke to slow breathing that was only my own, yet I lay rigid until dawn. I went to Christiania once to speak with a professor, and he listened, then asked for measurements as if a ruler could bind the sea. No one returned north with me. I never learned what lived beside our hull, only that it worked like a man and breathed like a beast. In sleep, I still saw the wet print climbing, 1 finger at a time.